Next up in my video series showing you how to draw animals as letters of the alphabet using the iPad and Procreate. We've got the letter Q, and for Q, we're gonna draw this cute quail. It's all in real time too, just like all my videos, no time lapse, no edits. So let's go ahead and jump into it. All right guys, so let's go ahead and get started. To begin with, I'm using a 4000 by 4000 pixel 300 dpi canvas. It's an RGB canvas. For my brushes today, I'm going to be using my creator set for Procreate. We'll start out with the Brainstorm sketch brush, move over to the smooth inker. You can pick this up on Gumroad. I'll leave the link down in the description below if you want to check it out. And then last but not least, I do have the color palette, once again, pre-made. So if you want to download the exact same colors that I'm using in today's video to follow along, you can get that for free on my website. If you go to bjdell.com, underneath the YouTube reference materials page, I believe we're on page 12 of this one, but the link's down in the description below if you want to get that too. Like I said, totally free. So let's go ahead and get started. To begin with, we're going to use black, and I'm going to add in a text box here. So we're going to go add text for our Q. And the background here to use as a guide, we'll double tap the letter there and then tap on our font so we can change our font over to Arial. That's what I've been using for this whole set of videos. Then we'll use the arrow here with uniform selected, and we'll just drag this out bigger. All right. Once we've got that kind of centered there, go ahead and lock that in. And then I'm going to come up here to my layers menu. We're going to drag layer Q underneath layer 1. We'll hit N for blend mode to open the opacity slider. We'll drop this down to about 10%. We want to be able to see it. We just don't want it to be too dark as we draw on top of it. So with layer 1 selected then, Brainstorm sketch brush here. I've got this set to 19%. We'll start to work on getting this sketched out. So I'm going to have this little squiggly line coming out of the Q be the feather. So we'll kind of pull up a feather shape here, curve, rounding out at the top there, and bring that back down. And kind of twisting my canvas here, we'll start to bring in some feather lines. Along that, kind of darkening up as we go. You'll see how I twist my canvas just to make those lines a little bit easier. My wrist likes to move in that direction a little bit more comfortably than having it like it was before like that. So feel free to twist your canvas around as you move it. We'll go ahead now and do an oval here. I'm going to do this on a new layer. So we do a new layer here, and I'll show you why here in a second. We'll do an oval, holding down our brush to lock it in, and then using that arrow, we can kind of move this so it matches up our sketch a little bit more. That's with uniform, and then if we use warp, we can kind of bring that around to match a little bit better. This is the sketch process, so you don't really have to make sure everything is lined up perfectly in this, but it just gets you a little bit closer to that end result a little bit easier. All right, now that we're done there, let's go ahead, we'll pinch those together so our sketch is all back on the same layer. Switching back to my brush here then, I'm gonna start to kind of bring around the sections that I want for the face. So we'll kind of have an oval here for the face, kind of block in where that's gonna go. And then we'll have kind of the belly coming up and around here. I'll have a line for that, just using the eraser to pull that back a little bit. I think here we'll pull in the face around and down so we can split up the colors for the face there. Just having that come into the wing like that. And then the actual portion of the face we'll block out with another oval, just kind of smaller there to make sure everything kind of fits inside here. So I'm going to pull up just kind of a cheek line here, coming around and back down to the front there, and then this will then bring the eye kind of around into the front of the face there, or the front of the head. You'll see this curve here kind of follows the curve back here. So you want those to kind of match up. All right. Bring that back in. Get our eye kind of positioned in here. Just an oval for that. We'll have kind of a thicker part here at the top where the brow is, or the eyelid is, and then the eyebrow here, just a really quick kind of block in where that's going to be. All right, next up, let's get to the beak here, and I'm going to pull this down. I'm not going to have this come down exactly with that hard oval shape there where it meets the beak. I think that's a little bit too much there. So if we pull it back a little bit, so where it does start to come into the beak here, I think it'll look a little bit better, a little bit more natural there. I'm just going to pull in some ovals here. Kind of start to visualize how that beak's going to come in. Probably do like a little overlap there. Front, and then maybe even pulling the cheek back there. All right, zooming in so we can see a little bit better here. We'll start to kind of fine tune this beak, pulling it back up. It down underneath the bottom. All right, I think that looks good. Do an oval here for the pupil, another oval for the iris here. I'm gonna pull back to see what we're looking at now. I think that's looking pretty good. We'll do a couple of flaps here underneath, and then we'll have to pull that back out into the body there. I'm going to move this up just a little bit. The other thing we can do too is using the arrow here and warp, we can kind of pull this around a little bit. If we've got some areas we want to mess with, we can do advanced mesh here. We can kind of pull in some of these areas just to play with them a little bit if you need to move stuff around. I think that looks pretty good. I'm going to pull this a little bit sharper here towards the front and give these a little bit more of a curve there. Then we can just throw in some feathers later on down the line. Just kind of get those blocked in where we know we're going to put those. All right. I think that looks pretty good. Last but not least, we need to get the little squiggly Q thing coming out of his head here. So if we just draw a curved line here with an oval on the end, we'll just bring that back around. Kind of have that overlap here with that line coming down further. And it'll narrow out there towards the back where it connects to the head. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So let me go ahead and come up here to my layers menu. I'm going to turn off my letter layer now. We've just got the sketch layer left, and we can kind of see what that looks like. I'm going to play around with some of these shapes so they match up the curve here and the curve here a little bit more. I think that looks good. So we're ready then to start adding our inks now. So coming back up to the layers, I'm going to make a new layer on top of layer 1, and then I'm going to hit N for blend mode to bring open that opacity slider just like we did. Whoops, not on this one though, on the sketch layer. And for blend mode on the sketch layer, bringing down the opacity slider to, say, maybe about 18%. Looks pretty good there. It might be different on yours depending on how hard you were drawing on the sketch layer. But then we're ready to ink on layer 3. So coming up here to our brush library, I'm going to switch over to the smooth inker. And I'm going to tap this again to bring open the brush studio. Then coming down here to stabilization, I want to make sure streamline is turned all the way up, and then we'll hit done. So this is going to allow us to get some of these big curves a lot easier. It's going to be a lot more steady as far as our hand and our line goes. So with that done then, let's go ahead and kind of start working down here. I've got the brush size on this set to 11%, and we'll start to bring some of these lines around. Stopping there so I can do this next one separately, using the eraser to just kind of fine-tune some of those lines on the ends, the tapers, and then just connecting these as I go. If you don't like the taper on the end, you can always grab that eraser and just pull back a little bit on the end there. Twisting your canvas possibly too might help, so you get complete control over the direction it's going and the feel of the curve there. All right, I think that looks pretty good. Next up, we're going to go up here to the layers menu again. I'm going to make a new layer because I want to bring this huge swooping motion down and around. I don't really want to stop right here and mess up the stroke, so we'll start here and just kind of bring this down and bring it around. Once again here, if you want to use that warp to kind of pull that line closer to what you had initially, you can do that. Because we're on a separate layer, you're not going to affect anything else, and then we can use that eraser there on the back where that connects. All right, same thing here, back to the brush. We'll pull in our line here, holding down to lock it in, and then using the eraser to erase those overlaps. That looks good. Use the eraser here, and then back to the brush. We'll go ahead and get in here a little bit tighter so we can see better. Start to bring in some tapers here around for that kind of smile on the mouth. Down around into the beak. Tapered line there, back and back around here. I'm going to pull this back a little bit so I can do that overlap there. So we'll do a tapered line, light press starting out, going heavier there towards the center. Gives us that nice taper on the end. And then, like I said, we can clean that up. We want to go in and sharpen that. All right. Use the eraser to pull this one back a little bit. And then once again, light press, heavier coming around the front. Some light tapers there. And then with the eye, I like to do, once again, this is thicker up here, so a light press into a heavier press into a lighter press at the end. And it gives us that heavier line there at the top. Kind of signifies where the eyelid or the eyelashes would be. Oval there for the pupil, and then another oval for the iris, holding down to lock it in. And then holding down here in the background to select white, I can come in here and add just a couple of dot highlights there inside the eye. And then holding back down to select that black again. Okay. Let's go ahead here then and keep moving around. I think, because I'm going to have a little bit of a stripe here coming around the face, and I want that to come down and around here. So I think I'm going to pull this back just a little bit to give some more room for that stripe as it comes down and around. There's not a whole lot of room right there. And then this one, since I'm on the same layer now, I can't just really nicely erase there. That's why I like to use the double layers, and this one, unfortunately, I wasn't on a secondary layer, so gotta be really careful doing that erasing there. All right, let's go ahead and pinch those together so they're all in one now, and we can make another new layer here so we don't have that happen again. We can kind of switch back and forth here. So back to my brush here and bringing these lines down and around. These I'm going a little bit lighter since they're on the inside of the body, so a lighter press. If you have problems with that, you can always drop the size of the brush down too. Erase these overlaps. I think that looks pretty good. Back to my brush here, get the eye. Whoops, I've got that other overlap too there in the front. We need to get that, so we'll erase that. All right, Here we get the eyebrow. So we'll just drag in around there. I think I'm just gonna fill that in black. And then our little squiggly here. We'll do the overlap here in the front. So a nice tapered line here coming back around into the head here. And then it's again thicker at the beginning in between those two lines, and then thinner there at the end. We'll do the erase there. And that's what we are left with. So from here then, we can go ahead, pinch these together so they're all on one. And then with my brush, I'm gonna open up that Brush Studio again by tapping on the brush, and I'm gonna turn off my streamline. Because here I just wanna add in some feathers around, and I find I get nicer tapers if I'm doing little quick lines like this. If I'm doing, you know, big long lines, the tapers are great with the streamline turned on, but these really kind of quick organic shapes, I like to have it turned off for those. All right, pull in a little bit of crease there in the front, around the eye there, the nostril here, get that in there, and a couple just texture dots around there, maybe even some back here on the back. Those just different sizes by pressing different levels of hardness on the screen. Okay. Coming back up here, I'm going to turn off my sketch layer. You can see what we're left with on the inks layer. So that's all done. From now, this point, we're ready to move on to the color flats. So let's go ahead and do that next. So to begin the color flats, first thing we're going to do is we're going to set our inks layer as reference. This allows us to drag and drop colors in on this next layer that we're going to make by hitting the plus. It's only going to kind of fill in the parts as designated by this reference layer. Makes color flats super quick and easy. So back up to the color palette, we've got this kind of lighter blue color here. We'll use that for this portion. Next up, we'll go ahead and use this darker blue for the inside part of the face there. This light blue, we'll use that for the beak. This kind of tannish color here, we'll use that for the back portion of the body. The darker brown, we'll use that for the wing, and then we'll use that for that squiggly part. Got this off-white color here we'll use for the under part of the belly. And then finally, turning off this background color here so you can see we need to fill in the white of the eye, but first we'll do the iris, that seafoam green, and then the white of the eye. So there we go. Super quick and easy using that reference technique to fill in color flats. Makes coloring in a huge time saver, and you are ready to move on. Next thing I want to do though, before I finish with these color flats, I'm going to make another new layer here, and we'll tap this and we'll set this to clipping mask. So what this is going to do, it's only going to show up on the areas that are filled in on the color flats layer. And then with the white selected, I want to get that stripe in here that comes kind of around the eye. So we'll bring this, I'm trying to see, maybe make this a little bit bigger, about 20%. I'm going to turn streamline back on. So if I go back to my brush, smooth inker, streamline all the way up under that stabilization tab. We'll do that, and we'll start to pull up this line around there. I don't know if I really like that or not. We'll try it one more time here. Maybe from that top direction. Makes it flow a little bit better there. And then kind of pulling this around, I'm going to just fix the ends here. I think overall that looks pretty good. I might even taper, zooming in here fairly close, taper where these lines come together. And with this, actually, I think I'm gonna have to bring that line further down to get a nice taper out of it. It's gonna pull back too much slowly pulling that back so I don't mess up the width of that line as it's coming around. Then pulling back out, you can see what we're left with. I think that looks a little bit better there. This is also the part too, since this is on a separate layer, you could always grab the arrow here and play around with the shape too. Kind of pull it around so it fits exactly like you want it to. Of course, here is where you start to run into the problems that you might start to thin out the gap of some of those lines as it comes around. So you got to decide if you want to do that or not. I think I'm going to leave it just like that for now, but that kind of gives you an idea of what is possible. The other thing too that we could do is if we bring this is that back and forth process of kind of the character design and what looks best once you have everything laid on there. We could pull that line completely out and not do a, like I said, the curve there. We could just pull this up more into the eye like that. And with that arrow there, pull this around a little bit better. And pull that line more like that. I don't know what looks best here. Maybe there, that looks pretty good. Sure, we'll use that one. All right, or we could even maybe go the opposite direction with it. How about that? Maybe have it curve up this way. Unfortunately, I'm not using a reference photo of a quail. I'm just kind of doing this from memory. So yeah, I think that looks good. We'll leave it there. So there we go. Our color flats are done. That extra line is done using that separate layer. So now we can pinch those together. They're all on one. We're ready now to move on to the highlights and the shadows. We're going to do the shadows first. So let's knock those out. We're going to make a new layer here for our shadows. We're going to tap this and set this as clipping mask, just like we did that white section. It's only going to show up on the areas that are colored in on our color flats layer. Now, the way that I've got the highlights in the eyes, we've got the bigger one on the left, smaller one on the right. So the light source is coming in from that top left. So shadows are going to fall back here in the back, and on the bottom, highlights are going to be on the left and on the top. That being decided, then we'll grab our color here on that second row for our shadows and drop our brush size back down to that 11%. Then we'll start to just bring in some curves here for our shadows. Now, this will not be, let me zoom in here. This will not be the final shadow color. This is not what we're going with for the shadows. This is just a color that we're going to use to get us there. We're going to drop the opacity on this so it's not going to look like this. So I'm going to get an area that's filled in and connected all together, and then I'll drag and drop my color in there. But before I do that, what I need to do is I need to come up here to my layers menu, and I need to turn off reference on that layer 3. If we drag and drop this color in on this layer with the reference still on, it's going to fill in that entire area there. So we need to make sure that's off first. With the lines connected, then we can start to drag in those colors there. I'm going to pull back out so I can make sure that the curve of this kind of follows that same curve and use my eraser. If it doesn't, I can kind of pull back a little bit on there. And where these connect, I want to make sure that these don't connect in a weird spot. So I'm going to twist and turn my canvas here. Just kind of pull this back to where these meet above that color. I don't want to have a break there. Again, creating a tangent there would not look good. All right, pulling back, you can see what we've got there. Okay, just kind of continuing this down. Connecting those lines. That one's pretty much connected though. I don't even need to drag and drop there. I can just do that as is. And then we'll continue to kind of hold this down and around here. Once again, I want this line to kind of go with the flow of what I've already got in there on that inks layer. So Just need to play around with that and make sure that that's nice and curvy like it's supposed to be, with the same flow of the curve that the inks layer has. All right, pulling back out, you can kind of see what we're left with there. I'm going to go ahead then and drop the opacity on this now. So coming up the layers menu and for blend mode, drop this down to honestly about 31%. I think that looks pretty good. Then from here we can kind of zoom in and get some of these other areas filled in. Again, just getting a nice curve to that, just the way it flows from one to the other. Make sure that that matches up. And under here. Back in here. That curve of the mouth there where the smile is, and then inside here, which we do need to fill in that section of the beak. We didn't zoom in enough to know that that wasn't filled in. So we'll get that filled in there. Back to our shadows color here. All right, pulling this around. Shadow there underneath, or in the inside part of the eye there at the top. Whoops. Kind of came over the edge there, so I got to fix that and bring it back around. Under here, underneath the eyebrow, get one in there. On the bottom and back side of this. On the back side of this eye too, where this fold and crease is, get one in there. Maybe even a kind of oval one here. Just like that. And then also here on the iris, I think we'll get one in there, which I'm going to fill this in a little bit better. We missed a little spot right there of the green. There we go. Get a little bit of a shadow there on the back side of that. Maybe even another little oval here. I think that looks pretty good. I'm gonna pull another one here on the back here. All right, pulling back out, you can see what we're left with there. And then once again, I'm going to tap this smooth inker, turn off that streamline. And then zooming in pretty tight here to get in on the underside of these, just following that same curve around, using that same taper technique so that those tapers at the end match up, and just getting the bottoms and undersides falling down on that right of the feathers. And one more set here. You'll see on those I'm going down underneath and then back and to the right. Okay. I think that looks good. So then we're ready to move on to highlights. So back up to our layers menu, new layer here. We're going to tap that, set that as clipping mask as well. And then let's go ahead and use actually that cream color for the belly. We can use that there. Use this kind of for some of the highlights in here. We'll bring one around here on the face. I'm going to turn my streamline back on for my smooth inker, stabilization, streamline max. Bring that around here. Using the eraser for those overlaps. Pull in here. This one's going to come on that top left-hand side of that line. You can even pull in a couple oval ones there. That looks good. On the beak, we'll get the beak, the front of the beak. kind of wider here and tapering off there towards the bottom. Having that curve a little bit. All right. And then probably here on this feather there at the top. One there, and maybe even on the edges of these feathers. We'll have to zoom in pretty close on this to be able to have better control over those lines. I'm not going to turn the streamline off here because it's not as important. Maybe hit some of these too. All right. And then just like we did with that, we're going to go up here to the end for blend mode, drop down the opacity, down about 20% looks pretty good. And then holding down white in the background here, I'll go ahead and I'll just do in some ovals here for some feather textures as well. Just a little bit of a different type of feather texture. And just varying the sizes of these. Keeping them all kind of that same elongated shape there. There's a couple inside here. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good there. And then finally, let's go ahead, and I think there's one more, I was thinking there was one more stripe here across the head. So if we go down here to the layers menu, we'll make a new layer on top of this one. This one, another stripe coming in here across the head. Kind of thin at the back and then wider at the front. And pull that back out. Match that up a little bit more for the curve of the mask there. Then with adding that in, I should probably drop out those little squiggly lines there. Using the arrow here for the warp, I can kind of fine tune this line if I want to pull that around a little bit more. I think that looks a little bit better. Connect that to the edge there, and then, like I said, I'm going to pull out those right there, and I think that looks pretty good. So there we go, our finished design. I'm just going to come in here then, make a new layer, and get this guy signed, and we will be done with today's video. All right, so there we go. A quail for the letter Q. As always, I really appreciate you guys watching. If you like today's video, do me a favor, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that bell for notifications for when I post new videos. Got a few more left in this series. We've got, I'll see, R through Z, so definitely leave a comment down below if there's a certain animal that you want to see for one of those letters, R through Z. Definitely let me know down there as well. Share this video with a friend too if you think they might be able to get some valuable information out of it. If you happen to follow along with the videos too, love to see what you guys do. So if you're on Instagram or Threads or any of the socials, tag me at BJDell so I can check them out. Instagram's the main one, so I definitely recommend sharing them there. But just love to see what you guys do following along with these. So thanks so much, and I appreciate it. So that's it for today. As for me, I can also be found online at bjdell.com. And until next time, keep creating.